Ça va? Est-ce qu'on va utiliser ça ce soir? Oui? D'accord. The police have guns to shoot tear gas canisters. I asked them if they're getting ready to attack and why they would need this if they're not planning on escalating, and they responded to move away from them. They pointed backwards. They said, "Sir, you can back off." And then I went to the other ones and I asked them if they were getting ready to attack, and they did not respond to me. Anyways, you can see that there's a huge militarization of the police, which I've gotten much footage of already. But, I mean, they're going to attack us. It's pretty clear. I don't know. You can't really be more clear than that. You know what I mean? They're standing there with fucking tear gas canisters. It's ridiculous. On Saturday, the 9th of August in 2025, 200 protesters had the shit kicked out of them by the Montreal police. The Montreal police were brutal, and they assaulted these protesters unilaterally without any instigation. The SPVM released several statements to the media about the fact that the protesters were, and I quote, criminal and violent. In fact, me and my friend Amelia asked them about why they were violent, and we sent them video footage proving that they started attacking protesters without any instigation, and their response was, the reason we did this was due to the violence and criminality of the protesters who were there. This is fundamentally untrue. The facts on the ground. I was one of 3 journalists who were there. Other facts on the ground. Those who reported on it and the SPVM are lying. And I can prove it to you. In fact, I recorded almost all of the protest and almost all of the violence. I got several key moments on footage. For example, a police officer shoving a bystander violently and then walking forward and throwing the first punches without any instigation. They claim that there was a window that was broken. I have found the people who were right next to the window that was apparently broken. I also have the moment where they fired a tear gas grenade into a crowd of unsuspecting bystanders, where they gassed an infant and a toddler as well as their father. The infant and the toddler and their father ran away from the area because of how violent it had become. Not only that, if somebody was a bystander in this area, they would be unilaterally assaulted, shoved, pushed aside, and not let into the village, where queer people have been welcome for decades. The village is one of the few places in Montreal City where there was a history of people being able to find safety and community. Meanwhile, those who were gay were not allowed into the village because of 200 riot cops, that's 1 riot cop per protester, who was there to block them. They blocked every single exit that you could possibly find except for a western exit in which they would expect for the protesters to go. They would all block you, hit you, and potentially arrest you. This includes when I walked up to them wearing full press gear and they threatened to arrest me several times and said, and I quote, "I don't care if you're the press, I will arrest you." This is illegal, with the Canadian Charter saying that the freedom of the press means I am allowed to be there to document what is going on because I am not participating in the protest. Me and my friend William have redocumented everything going on the field to show you exactly what happened, and I hope you enjoy this experience. Please hit that like, please hit that subscribe, share this with your friends, because we're trying to build an amazing media company that people will look at for years to come as someone who fought against manufactured consent and pushed the limit, keeping people in power to account. I hope you enjoy this video, and if you like it, comment, tell me your thoughts, check out my Substack, isaacpeltz.ca, and please sign up for our newsletter where we are doing tons of investigations and interviews that are pertinent to today's world. Here at Jardin Gamelin is where everything took place. We started gathering over there. Me and William did our little setup. We took some B-roll, and we talked about what was going on and why Rad Pride was going down.
Well, last year I was here. Last time the protest started just around here, and we went back and forth on St. Catherine. The police were continuously escalating until they attacked the demonstration, pepper spraying.
Over here, you had normal people singing and dancing to a DJ who was playing samba or salsa. None of them had any involvement with Rad Pride, with the Pink Bloc, or with anything that was going on with Fierté. Instead, it was just a group of salsa dancers, of people enjoying their evening with their kids and their families. This is where everyone was gathered. The tension when we began was extremely high. Everyone knew what was about to happen because all around us, every single exit was being closed.
Rad Pride, founded in 2023, is rooted in a sense of alienation much of the queer community has felt from the formal Fierté Montreal organization. The mass attacks of October 7th and Israel's subsequent genocide in Gaza prompted calls for Fierté Montreal to sever ties with the financial institutions and sponsors who have business interests in arms manufacturing and other financial affairs with Israel. The fiasco at Fierté Montreal over Gaza was compounded with the July 30th announcement that they are banning Israeli Zionist organizations from marching in the annual parade over hate and incitement, as well as advocated against sending food aid to the region. On August 5th, the president of the board of directors of Fierté resigned for personal reasons. Also that day, the ban on Zionist organizations was lifted, and they were re-invited to participate in the parade. The proverbial cock-up surprised few critics of Fierté. It only increased their fury at the festival's organizing body. Beyond the handling of the Palestine issue, the over-sanitized, corporate-tinged, and PR sponsorship-focused nature of Fierté is beginning to turn people off. For an increasing number of those in the LGBTQ+ community, Pride is being pinkwashed. However, rather than boycotting the events of a collapsing Fierté festival, the queer community of Montreal decided to build something in its ruins.
This is where I walked up to a police officer who had a grenade launcher. This police officer was just standing there with his grenade launcher, and I wanted to know whether they intended on using the tear gas on the protesters regardless of what happened. So I figured I'd go get an interview with him. It didn't really work out that way. Sirs. Ça va? Tu préfères français? Hein? Là-bas? Est-ce qu'on va utiliser ça ce soir? Oui? D'accord. It blocked off all of the eastern exits, all of the northeastern exits, some of the western exits, but William theorizes that they were specifically blocking us from going into the village. Because there was a stage just inside of the village, they did not want the property to get damaged on the stage. This is a group of queer people who have been harassed and beaten by the police. And the history of Montreal queer life, the history of Montreal Pride, is a violent and brutal history where the police continuously beat and continuously attacked people who were queer and gay, and in the village was the place that they found refuge. And so the idea of blocking a bunch of queer people who were simply trying to have a peaceful march from going into the village is shocking. Right here is where the cops were stationed. As the protesters walked forward, they walked towards the cops who were right here standing in a military formation. They were extremely ready. Specifically, they were blocking at a diagonal so that no one could walk around. They went and stretched across the whole thing. Bystanders who walked up, they got pushed, they got thrown. If you were a bystander, doesn't matter if you were with the protest or not, you would get pushed out of the way. And so, you'll see, somebody walks up right here, just a normal old man. A normal old man walks up, and he gets shoved out of the way by the cops. All he was trying to do was avoid the protest and get into the village during the festival. Instead, he gets shoved out of the way by the police as the protesters walk up. And as the protesters walk up, they're about a meter away from the police, standing right here, walk forward. There's one guy in specific, walks forward and swings. So, I'm standing there as the press. Now, here's the thing. You can beat on protesters legally. No, I'm kidding. You can't beat on protesters legally, but they don't really have any recourse. Me, I'm the press. The freedom of the press outlined in Canadian laws in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms means that I am not a part of the protest. I did not come as a participant, but as somebody who was there to document. On my chest, I had my badge, which said press, and on my back, I had a thing that said press on it. They knew that I was press. And so, I walk in there. I'm trying to document it. At one point, I had my camera in one hand with my phone and my 4K camera in the other hand, and I was filming myself filming it, and I made a very great video.
You can see stuff is immediately bad. I'm filming on one side. Ow.
That video is me getting punched in the stomach. Now, why they punched me in the stomach is very important. The stomach's not going to leave a lot of bruising. You can see, however, I do have some bruising from a bike that hit me in the side. I got it way less than poor William, who got his ass absolutely handed to him, including his camera. They punched his camera like that. They broke the shield around the camera's edges. Meanwhile, with my badge right here, they reached forward and grabbed my press pass and threw it on the ground. As they threw it on the ground, I was yelling at them, as you can clearly hear in this video. After they had backed off from assaulting the protesters who were here, the protesters were retreating after having been tear gassed, after having been pepper sprayed, and assaulted violently with no instigation. I walked back because my press pass was on the ground behind the line of shields by the riot police. I walked up, asked for my press pass. They said, "We'll arrest you." I said, "You can't arrest me. I'm the press." They said, "We don't care that you are the press. We will arrest you." So the protesters started moving north. The protesters were retreating from the violence that was being inflicted upon them by the police. And as they walked this way, singing joyfully, they went around the park, back to where they started, and gathered again to try and walk towards the village. However, that would be interrupted by being chased down and assaulted by the cops once again. The protesters return east, back near where they begin, and get assaulted once again, much more violent than the first time, and the police clearly decided that this was the moment that they were going to disperse the crowd. Afterwards, the protesters started retreating north, and as they're going north, the cops run towards them at a sprinting pace, and they tackle some people to the ground by ramming them with their shield. And some of them received an extra little beating while they were on the ground. Of course, the rest of the protesters realized that this was probably the moment that they wanted to go home because, you know what? Things were about to get way more violent. However, you could not go home there because up there they were blocking off both intersections and people could not exit the premises without leaving through Jardin Gamelin. As the protesters were being chased after from that direction towards the north, a commander wanted them to be corralled towards Jardin Gamelin. And so you see a commander in this photo that Will took pointing towards Jardin Gamelin. And suddenly all the protesters are being pushed in that direction. Now this occurs just before they pull out their grenade launcher and fire a grenade directly into the people who are not involved with the protest. From my point of view, it looked like the person who shot the tear gas grenade thought about it, pointed it, and fired. In William's photos, you can see that the commander who pointed in that direction Then you have somebody else who says to the person with the tear gas grenade to point in that direction and fire. And so it went through two lines of communication, which deliberately chose to fire into this area in front of a whole bunch of people who had nothing to do with the protest, families. And right here, in front of this garden box, there was a baby and a toddler who were sitting right there with their father as they got tear gassed. These children, of course, had nothing to do with the protest and were not there for the protest. And we got a lot of comments online of people being like, what an irresponsible parent. Why were they there at a protest with a 1-year-old? Well, guess what? They weren't. They were here completely bystanding and enjoying salsa music. Afterwards, those of us who are left gather around here on the grass trying to escape the police. The police are surrounding the park, and it looks like they're about to make another charge. Most people by this point have left because of the amount of injuries that these people have sustained. We're talking about 200 people down to maybe 15 left at the end. William and I, as well as maybe 4 other photographers who were there to document the incidents, stood right there and discussed what had happened. All of us were covered in pepper spray. All of us were covered in tear gas. All of us had bruises and were beaten. My skin was burning. I assume William's skin was burning since he took a bath in pepper spray. We thought there was a moment where it looked like we would try to go back into the march, that people would start walking again, but there was just too few. There was maybe 15, maybe 20, but almost everyone had left by then because of the severe level of violence that the police did with no instigation. Some people were on the ground on their knees, leaning their head back as their friends poured water on their eyes in an attempt to get rid of the amount of tear gas and pepper spray that may have been in their eyes. They were just trying to flush it out. The remainder of the people went towards the metro to take the metro home. And the police followed them in there and shut down the metro. There have been people who said there was tear gas that went off, although I have not seen any documented evidence, and neither have I had any reports from anyone who says that this happened. It is more likely that tear gas got blown in by the wind because of the amount that was in the area. However, the police did shut down the metro as they cleared out people who were trying to go home. There's a lot of misinformation about this weekend, but I was there, William was there, documenting what occurred because that is important to what we're trying to do as journalists. We should call a shot, a spade a spade. If a UN declares something a genocide, you can say it's a genocide. You don't need to avoid something for political reasons if you're truly neutral. There may be political influences trying to push back against our right to say anything we want. Freedom of expression is enshrined in the Charter of Rights, and journalistic integrity should be that truly neutral journalism exists via the use of language that is perfectly accurate and completely unpoliticized because it is exactly the facts. Why use language that softens the blow when it politically advantages someone when you could use accurate language that says the story? I hope this was an enlightening video for you and that we showed the facts on the ground and that it will counter the misinformation that is being used by the police and by several media companies to support those who are in power, to hurt and harm those who are queer. This big umbrella of people has constantly been assaulted, beaten, attacked, and killed by the police since forever, and will continue to be hurt and continue to be killed. And until we start naming a spade and accurately reporting, we will not have good media around this situation. With that, please subscribe to my newsletter, isaacpeltz.ca. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. I hope you have a great day.